after this, I think electronic media has come. It is so much of confusion to understand. And physically, if I can see the students, I think it will be very useful. What we cannot do anything because of this era. Okay, I sincerely thank Department of Endocrinology and of my parent institute SGPGI for giving me an opportunity to present on this. It's basically an interactive session. I don't know whether people can unmute yourselves and they can talk and they can explain their concerns, or they can explain the clinical situation if it is possible for them. So first of all, I would like to say that we are not mathematician, that I have to remember that the normal value of pH is this much, normal PaCO2 is this much, bicarbonate is 24, right? But we have no option as students, and we have to remember certain normal values. Like, I think these topics would have been covered yesterday, like the pH around 7.35 to 45 as normal, PCO2, bicarbonate, and anion gap, and how you will correct anion gap with corrected to albumin. So acid base analysis, I feel like it is like not like only mathematics. First step is you should know the history of the patient. Suppose what sort of patient you are receiving. Suppose you receive a patient with blunt trauma coming to you after hypovolemic shock. You anticipate that this patient will have which metabolic disorder? Can anybody speak? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can anybody speak? Like, see, history is very important when you are analyzing an acid-base disorder, right? So, what sort of acid-base disorder you anticipate in a patient with blunt trauma with hemorrhagic shock?
Shock
There should be.
leading on to
Lactic acidosis.
lactic
Lactate,
acidosis.
it is of lactates.
Okay, you anticipate metabolic acidosis. Okay. Now I will tell you that there is one patient in intensive care unit for which a recent surgery was done. There is ileostomy for that patient. Okay, and the ileostomy output was more than 2 liters per day, and she is having persistent hypokalemia. Now you tell me, when you send a blood gas for this patient, what electrolyte or what acid base abnormality you can anticipate in this patient?
Again,
Metabolic
acid.
Alkalosis.
Alkalosis. Okay, metabolic alkalosis. Acidosis might be there, like when this patient is in shock or something. So what I mean to say is, इतनी डेप्थ में हम करता है that you just take an ABG, we get an ABG, then we fix it over the ICU chart, and then we say that अच्छा सर acidosis है, bicarb कम है, ये कम है. वो नहीं. We should do it anticipating. So before I take, like suppose a patient with past history of respiratory disorder coming to intensive care unit, he is now intubated on ventilatory support, and somebody tells me that COPD. Okay, now I anticipate that, and he's chronically dependent at home on steroids, bronchodilators, and so many aspects. I anticipate that this patient will be having acute and chronic respiratory acidosis. Okay, and there might be some amount of metabolic alkalosis also in this patient. So always correlate these things with the clinical findings. Always correlate with the previous ABG or electrolyte reports which are there. Okay, and validatory check. Always you need to check with the laboratory bicarbonate if it is available. Okay, laboratory bicarbonate. Then you check the H plus ion concentration, 24 multiplied by PaCO2 by bicarbonate. Okay, if it is 40, the pH will be 7.40. Or simply majority of the blood gases will have what is called as total CO2 content. Total CO2 is nothing but the reflection of the dissolved bicarbonate, as we know that majority of the bicarbonate is reflected as carbon dioxide. It should match with the clinical picture. It should match with the electrolytes which you are having. Then you come to the next step, which is the most important or life-threatening implication, that is hypoxemia. Okay, where you have what is estimation of PaO2. What is the right PaO2 for this patient? What is called as age predicted PaO2. How much I can anticipate the PaO2 in this patient if I keep him on ventilator? Suppose healthy lung like me, if I was given 100% FiO2 of 1, okay, I should be able to generate PF ratio or PaO2 up to 500 or 600, right? So based on this, we know the criteria like PaO2 by FiO2 more than 300, 200 to 300. Okay, then we calculate what is called as alveolar oxygen. atmospheric pressure minus water vapor pressure into FiO2 minus PaCO2 divided by respiratory coefficient. Okay. So normal, what are the conditions where AaDO2 is increased? You can see if there is hypoxemia, the first thing I should calculate is the AA gradient. Then if it is normal, it can be hypoventilation or VQ mismatch. If it is widened, it might be either diffusion limitation or shunt. Okay, now we go to the next step. All these would have been discussed previously, yesterday mostly by the endocrinology team or the previous speaker. We know that when they are in the same direction, we suspect a metabolic disorder. Opposite direction, we suspect a respiratory disorder. So you calculate anion gap. I remind you, at the end of my talk, I'll tell you that you should calculate anion gap for every disorder, not only high anion gap metabolic acidosis, for every disorder. So then you calculate the corrected anion gap and you know the compensation formulas. Very difficult, like I remember it as 1, 4, 2, 5 for respiratory, acute respiratory acidosis, chronic and alkalosis. And metabolic acidosis, alkalosis, I simply remember it as 4 by 3 and 3 by 4. The change in PaCO2, 4 by 3 times the change in bicarbonate, the opposite in metabolic alkalosis. PaCO2, 3 by 4 multiplied by change in bicarbonate. Whatever formulas you use, it doesn't matter. Finally, you should remember and you should interpret the blood gas analysis. So in all the disorders, again, you calculate what is called as delta gap or delta ratio. Delta ratio is the change in anion gap minus 12 divided by 24 minus bicarbonate. So if it is less than 0.4, it is normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Less than 1, it is high anion gap. 1 to 2, it is high anion gap purely. Less than 1, it is both high anion gap and NAGMA. More than 2, that means there is high anion gap acidosis with concurrent metabolic alkalosis and pre-existing compensatory respiratory acidosis. So you can simply carry on this card. Okay. See, in our clinical practice, you know how busy we are. It is not that if I remember or I forget the formula of this, I am a bad student. I will be a bad student if I don't interpret the blood gas in front of me and I just copy it and paste it and give some immediate correction to this patient, right? So you can formulate a card which is easy for you, as you can paste it in your cell phone, you can use it and then you can verify and compensate in formulas, all those things you can calculate and interpret the blood gas analysis. Okay. So now case number 1, who will answer? I don't have the list of the students now. I think anybody can volunteer this case. A 26-year-old male, severe acute pancreatitis with day 12, modified CTSI 10 by 10 with decreased urine output in respiratory acidosis. This is the blood gas analysis of this patient. So the topic given to me is common clinical situations and its approach. Okay, I will not teach you the theory. So you need to tell me what is happening to this patient. Zero one cars. I think you will get samosa after this, na? कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. Physically, though, you will get samosa and tea.
Online, no samosa, sir.
No samosa online, na? If it is physically, we used to go there to eat samosa and tea. Okay. Now nothing is there. So tell me.
Anyone can unmute and please tell something. It's the class is interactive. It's better.
Yeah. Otherwise, see, I will be telling and be sleeping, or you will carry on with some other work also. Arey, by 7.154 pH is normal or abnormal?
It's a high anion gap metabolic acidosis.
Okay. Who is that? Shreyas?
No, Piyush, sir.
Piyush. Okay. Good. Okay. He's high anion gap metabolic acidosis. So he took his time to calculate. So what is that? There is only metabolic acidosis. What was taught to you first? Whether you should comment about respiratory or metabolic component? There is respiratory acidosis also. Now in this patient, first I interpret the pH. First I will interpret the pH. Then I will immediately look at PaCO2, not the bicarbonate. Okay. So first of all, before that, you should comment about life-threatening events, hypoxemia. It is there or not in this patient? It's there, na? FiO2 of 0.5 and PaO2 is 60. His PF ratio is 120. and his alveolar arterial gradient is elevated, right? And you have respiratory acidosis in this patient, and you, as you said, you have high anion gap acidosis because the lactate is also high, very good. But if you calculate the delta ratio, there is coexisting normal anion gap metabolic acidosis also in this patient, that you can see by evidence of slightly increased chloride levels, which are slightly rising. Okay, so don't think that there is only one disorder in one patient. If you think that only there is lactic acidosis or high metabolic acid, high anion gap metabolic acidosis, your approach will change. This patient is in imminent state of collapse now. If you don't intubate him, or if you don't resuscitate him well, he is in imminent failure of respiratory failure. He will have cardiac arrest after some time. Understand? So that means the primary metabolic compensation is to reduce the PaCO2, but he reached a stage where he exhausted. That means immediate respiratory support is required for this patient, along with further resuscitation which should take place. So somebody said that there is high anion gap acidosis, and the most common cause which we encounter is lactic acidosis. Say a brief review about how the lactate increases in intensive care unit. In steady state, we know this pathway. In biochemistry, we might have read glucose by glycolysis is converted into pyruvate. So what happens in stressful situations? There is excess diversion of the pathway to glycolysis. The glucose is supplied and glycolysis, and pyruvate is converted. Either the pathway of Krebs cycle gets exhausted, or the metabolic chains in between these two will be disbalanced. So this leads to increased lactate production. So what are the various reasons? You can see that various enzymes which are taking place here, like pyruvate dehydrogenase, role of thiamine, role of vitamin C, okay, all these things will play here in the conversion, alteration of the redox cycle. So when lactate is elevated, you should think that there is increased pyruvate production, or there is impaired utilization of the pyruvate, or there is an altered redox state which is favoring the pyruvate conversion to lactate, or there is decreased lactate utilization. So there are many reasons for lactic acidosis which can happen in intensive care unit. So there are classification of lactic acidosis. Can anybody say what is Cohen and Wood's classification of lactic acidosis? Nobody. So it is type A and type B. Okay. When there is clinical evidence of tissue hypoxia, it is called type A. It can be with global or regional hypoperfusion. And type B, when there is no clinical evidence of tissue hypoxia. In this, there is sub-classification: B1 with underlying diseases, B2 with drugs and toxins, B3 being inborn errors of metabolism. So there will be an overlap between type A and type B. We cannot demarcate that it is type A or type B. So how will I approach any patient with shock like this? The first thing I will do is optimization of oxygen delivery. That I can see by optimizing his saturation, increasing his hemoglobin, address the needs of increasing oxygen demand like fever, agitation, seizures, and meet the desired amount of cardiac output. Then you have to evaluate certain pathophysiologies, like evaluating for global or local hypoperfusion. Evaluate these signs, whether they are filling, and correct them. And tissue hypoperfusion, sometimes the lactate will be elevated with some amount of compartment syndrome, some amount of mesenteric ischemia. You might have heard that non-occlusive mesenteric ischemia can be encountered in critically ill patients. So all these can account for increased lactate production. So if I think and I find out the source of this lactate, if there is clinical improvement in the patient, then I'll continue with the same resuscitation. If not, then how to do? So there is a bridge. So these biomarkers, I cannot go into the depth of this because of lack of time. You can see that lactate, central venous oxygen saturation, and the veno-arterial carbon dioxide gap. This can help you to differentiate whether we are having a problem with microcirculation or macrocirculation, or it can act as a bridge between macro and microcirculation. Okay, the normal PaCO2 gap is less than 6. More than 6, you can suspect that there is some amount of cardiac dysfunction in this patient. It is very simple. See, SeVO2 lesser, then you look at the PaVSO2, it means that it is high cardiac output state. If it is elevated, it is low cardiac output state with dysoxia. Okay, case number 2. This is a patient with 55-year-old female, history of abdominal distension from the past 2 weeks. She is a case of ovarian cancer, TAH, BSO. 5 cycles of chemotherapy were given. Contrast CT suggested that there is pleural effusion, ascites, and a pleural tap suggested diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. 1 week after hospitalization, she developed respiratory failure, shock. ABG revealed this picture. Okay, it is what? Acidemia, PCO2 is okay, it is metabolic acidosis. Then further interpretation, she was performed with expiratory laparotomy, it was gut perforation and fecal peritonitis was done. Distal ileum, temporary abdominal closure was done, broad spectrum antimicrobials were continued, cultures were taken. Shock improved, everything improved, but the lactate was persistently high. The workup of this patient revealed what is called as the LDH levels were very high. So chemotherapy was started for this patient and the lactate levels reduced. So what does it show? So this is a case of mixed type A and type B lactic acidosis. Initially it was type A, but later on it is the tumor cells which are leading to production of lactate. Hello? Somebody has to unmute themselves, I think. So this is type B, okay, associated with the imbalance of the underlying disease and drugs. So this case, you can see that malignancy is the reason which predisposed, and you can remember that there is what is called as exaggerated glycolysis in newly produced malignant cells. What is this called? Warburg effect. You might have heard. So other disorders like thiamine deficiency, pheochromocytoma, TKA, short gut syndrome, all these can predispose to this. Hence, the person who is making can unmute himself, it will be very nice. So what about the other thing? B2 is lactic acidosis. You can see the medications which can cause. Okay, and B3, as I said, inborn errors of metabolism. This I think pediatric and endocrinology, your department can definitely see. Milas and pyruvate carboxylase, PDH deficiency, G6PD deficiency, all these can predispose to lactic acidosis. If still the lactate is high, especially when there is short bowel syndrome or when you use solvents like propylene glycol, which is being used in sedatives, and in some patients with DKA, you can encounter what is called as D-lactate acidosis. D-lactate is difficult to measure. What we measure is L-lactate. D-lactic acidosis has very high mortality because of the various complications and its late diagnosis. So, if lactate is high, I think that it is the most common, that is type A lactic acidosis. I give fluids if the patient is fluid responsive. I check the central venous oxygen saturation. If not, if abnormal or if dilated, then I consider about vasodilators and optimizing his microcirculation. If oxygen delivery is poor, hypoxemic, anemic, myocardial dysfunction, these should be corrected. Then you think about type B lactic acidosis, which can also lead, like liver diseases, medications or malignancy, which can predispose to lactic acidosis. Case number 3, 15-year-old male, history of diabetes mellitus on insulin, presented with features of lower respiratory tract infection. On examination, he is febrile, tachycardic, hypotensive. The ABG reveals this picture. So what is this?
Acidosis, hypoxemia,
Metabolic acidosis.
acidosis with respiratory compensation.
Good. Metabolic, acidemia, okay, acidosis, okay. Respiratory compensation, is it adequate? See, you can see the difference now. See, 24, it came to 10 now, right? 14. I told you the formula very simple. 4 by 3 multiplied by 14.
It is
So how much? How much CO2 should be there? So what is this picture finally? So he is also having hypoxemia, acidemia is there, metabolic you said very good, compensation approximately okay, delta ratio, anion gap is 18, elevated, corrected anion gap is 18, okay. you have to correct it to the albumin. Albumin is 2.5, very less. Then delta ratio is 0.4. So this patient has high anion gap and non-anion gap metabolic acidosis with compensation. Okay. And what is the corrected sodium? How will you calculate corrected sodium? In DKA or in, this is a diabetic emergency, na? So measured sodium plus 2 into glucose minus 100 by 100. 1.5 also people use, 1.6 to 2 is the accepted. See, this corrected sodium is with the previous ABG machines or electrodes. Now we have ion selective electrodes. I think the faculty of endocrinology might correct me if I am wrong. Ion selective electrodes, I don't think so. This correction is applied now in the management of diabetic ketoacidosis. This is with the previous, I think, flame photometry and other principles of sodium measurement, which we require various corrections. Now the labs ABG sodium, which you will get mostly will be correct. So how will you diagnose DKA? You want me to proceed or anybody will answer?
Urine ketones and pH.
Okay, urine ketones. I strongly disagree. Okay, urine ketones, yes, it is a screening test, but with this actually in intensive care unit, majority of the people we label as DK. Any patient comes to in our ICU, even now I encounter patients, they will tell that sir urine ketones positive है, DKA है, sugar ज़्यादा है, हमने तो resuscitation शुरू कर दिया. So there are a lot of false positives with urine ketones. Okay, serum ketones is the gold standard. You should always try to measure beta hydroxybutyrate. Okay, what is the ketone body which you measure in urine ketone? What is the name of the test?
Acetone.
Okay, but the major ketone which is there in diabetic ketoacidosis is beta hydroxybutyrate. Okay, and during recovery, as you know that the urine ketones might be false positive and the patient is recovering, and the other conditions also like starvation and so many other conditions which can produce urine ketones. Urine ketones, I definitely agree that it is feasible, you can measure it, but along with that you should have high anion gap, background of diabetes mellitus, precipitating factor like infection or missing insulin therapy, then bicarbonate less than 10. Okay, all the other features should resemble the diabetic ketoacidosis. So our target should be again normalization of the serum ketones, which you can measure by various strips which we have, point of care methods, and surrogate markers are anion gap closure, normalize the pH and bicarbonate. How to achieve this? Various fluid resuscitation measures are there, correction of dyselectrolytemia like sodium, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, and insulin administration, especially after correcting the hypokalemia. So you should target the RBS reduction. Previously, people say that RBS reduction should be between 50 to 75 deciliter per hour. Now I will say that it is not RBS reduction which you should target. It is the serum osmolality change, not more than 3 milliosmol per kg per liter per hour. See, in DKA, I will be seeing along with elevated sugar, elevated blood urea nitrogen. That also will contribute to this electrolytemia like sodium disturbances. All these will contribute to the complications which can happen like osmotic demyelination or cerebral edema, which is the most common, which we are worrisome complication in the management of diabetic ketoacidosis. Along with that, you should manage the precipitating factor. You know these formulas which are available in all the textbooks, like how much water deficit is there, how be there like sodium, chloride, potassium. Okay, as you can see, the phosphorus deficit also significantly present in patients with diabetic ketoacidosis. So I will not go how you resuscitate. There are various guidelines when to start normal saline, when to taper them and to get them to 0.45% normal saline. When the sugar, usually I remember 200 and 300. When we reach 200 sugars in DK and 300 in HHS, you can go ahead. But these formulas are okay for ward patient, but not for intensive care unit where we deal with multi-organ failure. Simultaneously, I'll be looking at oxygenation, electrolyte disturbances which are happening, and I might not prefer normal saline with the advent of the balanced crystalloids which we have. So these are all the various controversies still going on in the diabetic ketoacidosis. This literature is way back in 1950, 1957, say that you give so much of normal saline, you get that sodium correction done, very good. But Always look at the patient, think about the electrolyte disturbances which are there, and choose your IV fluid accordingly. We know that insulin should be administered. Bolus doses are not recommended nowadays. You get started with infusion and target the sugar as 50 to 75 or the change in osmolarity which I had mentioned. Potassium correction is especially very important when you administer before, as there can be internal redistribution and severe hypokalemia which can lead to cardiac arrest. Always correct hypokalemia before starting insulin administration. So what about role of sodium bicarbonate? I think you might be using in your wards, like whenever there is some metabolic acidosis, soda bicarb दे दो, देते हैं ना वार्ड में, तो कब देंगे? What are the problems with sodium bicarbonate? Anybody?
So only fluid has to be given. Only if the absolute value is less than 15, then it can be of soda bicarbonate can be given. But the problem is
If I give-
intracerebral hemorrhage is a complication.
Intracerebral hemorrhage. Okay. How will you give sodium bicarbonate? Suppose आपके पास 10 एम्प्यूल मिला है, मेरे सिस्टर ने बोला, आपके सीनियर कंसल्टेंट जो बंदा आके अरे मैंने बोला ना दे दो सोडियम बाइकार्बोनेट, तो हाउ विल यू गिव?
5% dextrose.
So what is the main problem? See,
formula.
this is available as
hypernatremia,
yes, very good.
hypernatremia, ionic hypocalcemia, fluid overload, intracellular acidosis, and hypokalemia.
Already suppose that patient now whom we have seen, that pancreatitis patient with PCO2 of 42. Suppose if you give sodium bicarbonate for him, what will happen? It will lead to further production of carbon dioxide. Without controlling his respiration, you are causing load of even carbon dioxide on him. Okay, and this is a very high osmolar solution, 2000 milliosmoles. 2000. Okay, it doesn't, like in a peripheral line, the way you push, it can lead to various complications. If extravasation or something happens, it can lead to gangrene of the hand also. And majority of that is converted to carbon dioxide. Whatever sodium bicarbonate is given in a spontaneously breathing patient, I will always alert the clinician that the workload of the respiratory muscles will definitely increase, and he has to eliminate all the carbon dioxide also that he want to give. And as you said, sodium load, 1 milliequivalent per ml is the sodium load. As somebody said, that ionized calcium will come down because the pH will increase, and calcium binding proteins, all they go and bind them, and the ionized calcium comes down if you are predisposed to arrhythmias. So I will restrict sodium bicarbonate use. When will I use? In severe hyperkalemia, yes, when rest of the measures are failing. Drug intoxications like tricyclic antidepressant poisoning, where you have broad QRS complexes and these things. Severe metabolic acidosis with myocardial depression, pH especially is less than 7.15, and it is not respiratory. I will prefer in intensive care unit to start the renal replacement therapy early for such patients rather than giving the sodium bicarbonate load until I prime the circuit and ready the dialysis. Then until then I might use little bit of sodium bicarbonate. Very cautious as an infusion and very less dose. So people recommend half of the calculated deficit slowly. That the deficit can be calculated by various formulas like 0.3 into body weight into base excess. And once the pH reaches 7.2, you can stop it. See, what you have to understand is when you are correcting a metabolic acidosis, see, you might have seen the oxygen dissociation curve in Ganong physiology. Okay, whenever you are correcting the acidosis, there will be shift of the Odisha curve to the right side. So why is this shift happening? To facilitate the oxygen delivery, and so that the other organs will get compensated. By giving sodium bicarbonate or other therapies, you are drastically pulling it and getting it to the left side where the oxygenation of the tissue can get impaired. You might think that I had improved the bicarbonate of this patient from 9 to 20, but you look at the microcirculation, you look at the perfusion of various organs. Your lactate would have increased by bicarbonate therapy. Thereby, you can show that there is hypoperfusion of the tissues by forcefully shifting the ODC curve. So be cautious of using drugs like sodium bicarbonate. We have alternatives to sodium bicarbonate like THAM and Carbicarb, which I have used very hardly. THAM I have seen once, but they are not recommended and they are not easily available. So let us not discuss about them. Case number 4. So this is a patient with dehydrated man who presented with diarrhea. Rumer ABG shows this picture. And I introduced the complexity. See, case by case, I will be increasing the complexity. Okay. Now I added one more term. What is urinary anion gap? Minus 25. What I mean to say in this? Anybody? So what does this picture show you at least? Okay, I don't think so. There is.
Metabolic
Okay, this is
acidosis with
very good metabolic acidosis. Good compensation.
Compensation.
Anion gap is negative. Okay, urinary anion gap. Now, not serum anion gap. I am talking about urinary anion gap. Okay, it is diarrhea. So another case, 49-year-old man, kidney stones, investigated for hypertension. Now this picture again acidosis, it is metabolic, and you can see that his pH is 6, and I added that urinary anion gap is positive in this patient. So this is another complexity, like you are telling that it is normal anion gap, that is NAGMA, and anion gap is positive. That means it is type 1, where the renal tubular acidosis, distal acidification of the urine is lost. Okay, and kidney stones is a frequent complication of type 1 RTA. So this is how you go to the next gap. So we have gone to serum anion gap. Now I added what is urinary anion gap. So urinary anion gap is sodium plus potassium minus urinary chloride. It is positive in type 1 and type 4 RTA. It is negative in all extrarenal. You can remember the diarrhea, upper GI loss, whatever the most common conditions which you encounter in your ward, the anion gap will be negative, urinary anion gap. So now you look at the urinary pH. Distal acidification is impaired in type 1. So there can be alkaline pH, and the differentiation is like you can load sodium bicarbonate with like tablet no doses or something, and you can see that there is no effect when there is acidification system is there. Whereas in type 2 RTA, the urinary pH can slightly increase when sodium bicarbonate load is given. This is how you differentiate between type 1 and type 2. And hyperkalemia is a classic feature where aldosterone secretion or resistance is the problem pathophysiology in type 4 renal tubular acidosis. As you can see here, that hyperkalemia is common in type 4, and in type 2 it is the proximal tubule defect, where almost each and every absorption is impaired. Whereas here, type 1, it is the excretion of the H plus ion, the distal tubule, where the distal acidification is gone. So you have severe metabolic acidosis like plasma bicarb is less than 10 here. It is around mild 12 to 20. And type 4, acidosis is not so significant, but the potassium levels will be significantly high. So the management is you correct the underlying disorder like removal of stones and other predisposing conditions which can take place. Along with that, you can supplement alkali therapy with potassium supplementation and diuretics, thiazides, especially in type 2, and fludrocortisone with potassium restriction can be used. So these are the various causes of type 1. As you can see that autoimmune disorders, various drugs like we remember amphotericin B, lithium, and these drugs can predispose. And type 2 is seen in vitamin D deficiency, various drugs like aminoglycosides. And type 4 is most commonly encountered, I think, in your OPDs where you have patients with diabetic nephropathy. That is one of the most common causes of type 4 renal tubular acidosis. Case number 6. 76-year-old female with type 2 diabetes mellitus was found at home in confused state. pH of 6, bicarbonate of 6, PaCO2 of 29. And her serum osmolarity you can see is 324. So what I am talking about now? Some amount of drug intoxication which could have happened. Okay, this is a case where there is HAGMA plus NAGMA, and this is a case where there is osmolar gap. This is another gap which I am introducing to you, that till now serum anion gap, now urinary anion gap, now I am going to what is called as osmolar gap. High osmolar gap is there. Normally it is less than 10. Okay, you can see that the serum osmolarity is 324, and the calculated osmolarity by the electrolytes which we are given is 305. So the difference accounting for 19 is high osmolar gap acidosis. So this can happen with ethylene glycol, methanol, or propylene glycol infusions, intoxication. Okay, this is how you calculate serum osmolarity. You know that sodium, glucose, bun, and ethanol also can be added if there is suspected drug intoxication. I will not go into the management of this. You can see that alcohol metabolism, you can know that various inhibitors like fomepizole can be used. Case number 7. Nasogastric suction was placed in 45-year-old paralytic ILS patient. Okay. Now 2 liters of 4.5 liters of fluid was drained without any replacement. So what do you expect in this blood gas?
Metabolic
Anybody?
alkalosis.
Okay.
Metabolic alkaline.
Alkalemia. Okay. When it is in the
Alkalosis.
blood and pH is abnormal, you label it as metabolic alkalemia. Okay. 7.53 pH. Compensation, expected compensation is 50. The PCO2 is at 49. Okay, good. Anion gap is 12. Now, what further workup we do? Urinary chloride. Okay. Now, this is another woman. Nurse referred from a nursing home with profound weakness and areflexia. Okay. And history of loss of appetite due to some tongue ulcer, for which she was given some topical solution last 2 months. Heart rate is 90, BP is hypertensive, 200 by 92. ABG reveals again 7.58 with PCO2 44, bicarbonate 44. So admission biochemistry, sodium, potassium, chloride, and spot urinary chloride was 74. So I had given you one more electrolyte in the urinary chloride, spot urinary chloride 74. What does it suggest? So this patient is having high urinary chloride and it is chloride underscore alkalosis. Further workup will reveal the patient has low aldosterone and low renin, excessive mineralocorticoid. See this, for this tongue ulcer, she was receiving a topical steroid which could have predisposed to the development of metabolic alkalemia in this patient. So now, how will you approach? Bicarbonate more than 30. Most commonly, you will get diuretics, vomit. Diuretics is the most frequent cause of metabolic alkalosis, okay? Especially in our ICUs, we receive patients with bicarbonate of 30, 35 with metabolic alkalosis. They would have, like, the most common diagnosis done outside is heart failure also, okay? They give lot of diuretics, furosemide and rest of the diuretics, and the patient will be dehydrated severely, and this patient presents with metabolic alkalosis. Along with that, you assess the volume status. If the BP is normal and the patient is hypovolemic, most common is that you need not test for urinary chloride also. It is the chloride responsive alkalosis. You start them with hydration, normal saline, that patients will improve. If this patient, like the patient whom I have shown you, like elevated blood pressure is there and euvolemia is there, then you get the urinary chloride level. When you have an unclear cause, that means you excluded most common causes like diuretics, vomitings, dehydration, which can predispose to metabolic alkalosis. So you can check even urinary potassium levels also in this. So if urinary potassium levels are low, then laxative abuse also is one of the reasons. And as you know that metabolic alkalosis, hypokalemia, these two coexist with each other. And hypokalemia maintains the metabolic alkalosis. If you don't correct the potassium of the patient, then metabolic alkalosis cannot be treated at all. So further workup, when the chloride levels are high, potassium is high, now you consider mineralocorticoid excess or apparent mineralocorticoid excess, which can predispose to metabolic alkalosis. There you can measure renin and aldosterone levels. So you can see, I think, apparent mineralocorticoid excess, like this patient, renin will be low, aldosterone will be low. It is the exogenous mineralocorticoid which led to this syndrome. Otherwise, endocrinologists, I think you people will be very familiar with syndromes. We will not remember these cons causing primary hyperaldosteronism and secondary hyperaldosteronism causing the complications like renal artery stenosis can be suspected. So etiology, you found out that this is the most common reason, as I told you, digestive losses, loop diuretics, thiazide diuretics. Now you work on the other etiologies like adenomas, secondary aldosteronism causing things, and apparent mineralocorticoid and treat them accordingly. So correct the precipitating factor, management, correct hypokalemia. You should calculate the potassium deficit. ऐसे मत बोलना है that 3.5 potassium है, now the potassium is 3, I started giving potassium. No, you should estimate the potassium deficit in this patient and treat it accordingly. So roughly you can say that it is 50 milliequivalent per kg. The daily requirement in potassium is 1 to 2 milliequivalent per kg. In catabolic states like intensive care unit, it might go even up to 3 to 4 milliequivalent per kg. So around 10% deficiency is anticipated for every 1 milliequivalent drop in potassium. So based on that you calculate. Suppose 4.5 I take normal potassium. The potassium has fallen down to 3.5. So there is 10% deficit. 10% of 50 milliequivalent per kg. So 50 into 60 is 3000, 60 kg body weight if I assume. So I need to supplement 300 milliequivalents of potassium for this patient today. So normal saline administration, like chloride deficit also can be calculated by this formula, 0.2 into weight multiplied by 100 minus plasma. You give corresponding amount of 0.9% saline. So other like acetazolamide and these things can be tried in metabolic alkalosis when it is not responding to rest of the therapies or when there is other pathophysiology which is going on, like chloride unresponsive and rest of the pathologies. Case number 9. So this patient has generalized weakness, gradually progressive. She developed difficulty in swallowing along with drooling of saliva. Today morning she complained difficulty in breathing. So what do you anticipate? What is this disorder? Slept, listening.
Respiratory acidosis.
Respiratory acidosis. Okay. Now, after this class, you should be able to tell that whether it is acute respiratory acidosis or chronic respiratory acidosis or acute and chronic respiratory acidosis. So, she is getting hypoventilated. Now, you can see that AaDO2 for the first time, even though PaO2 is 70, is normal. Hypoventilation is the reason. As I showed you that AaDO2 is elevated in shunt and VQ mismatch. Now, respiratory. So when the expected change of pH is 0.08, the change in PCO2, then it is acute. When it is 0.003, the change in PCO2, then it is chronic. So this is acute respiratory acidosis as the pH is matching 7.24 when I take it as 0.008 multiplied by change in PCO2, which is 20. So this is matching with acute respiratory disorder. This is a patient with chronic bronchitis, okay, and expecting lot amount of sputum. Now I expect that he will be having acute and chronic respiratory acidosis. Okay, you can see that the pH when you use that formula is matching towards acute and chronic respiratory acidosis as the pH is falling in between these two, 7.16 and 7.31. So this is how respiratory acidosis will come. I will not talk about the management of respiratory acidosis here, as you know that whether we have to find out the pathophysiology, whether there is decreased minute ventilation because of any depression in the respiratory muscles or any dead space increase because of complications like pulmonary embolism, interstitial lung disease, or there is increased carbon dioxide production because of fever, overfeeding, thyrotoxicosis, or you have any upper airway obstruction. Troubleshoot the failure which is responsible and address the etiology. You can do respiratory supports, you can do even extracorporeal supports for the removal of carbon dioxide. So this is a patient with emergency department, 17-year-old, complaints of tightness in chest, shortness of breath, tingling in the fingers around the mouth. No significant past medical history and he is not on any medication. So room air ABG showed PaO2 very good, 7.49 and PCO2 of 27. Bicarb is normal. So this patient is having, she is having
Respiratory alkalosis.
She might be having some examination. Okay, before examination, we will also become like this now, that you cannot remember everything, then you will go inside and you will be in shock. Okay, so this is acute respiratory alkalosis, query a panic attack. So this is chronic respiratory alkalosis actually is very rare. Okay, if anybody documents that disorder, like in examination, it will be, he will be in soup. So better not label. This is how HT look like. See, 34-year-old climber coming from Mount Everest. He's staying there for 2 weeks. That means he's getting compensated. Now his altitude is this, and a blood gas is done for research project. So this can show chronic respiratory alkalosis. You can see that the expected change is this, and use the formulas, it matches. So chronic respiratory alkalosis, you can easily forget this disorder. You will not encounter it in your clinical practice. So respiratory alkalosis can be done by so many disorders, as we know that any intracranial pathology or any drugs or any pulmonary pathology or others like high altitude, pregnancy, as you know that it is a physiological change which can happen in pregnancy. Case 13. 21-year-old female, shortness of breath for the past 6 hours. She is a known case of mononeuritis multiplex on methotrexate, dapsone, prednisolone. Pulse rate is okay, this is okay. Room air SpO2 is 76, but ABG revealed that is saturation PaO2 is 99 and saturation is 96%. What is happening? Right, there is a discrepancy between room air saturation and the saturation which I am getting in the blood gas. Okay, anybody? It is written. So now I am dealing with abnormal hemoglobins. Okay, so this case, it might look simple. When I was managing COVID ICU, there was a patient who came in the night, young boy, and somebody told me that his saturation was 75% and he was not having any signs of respiratory distress, and he was already intubated by the private hospital before coming to us. So we thought that, I didn't know, I am at home. Then I told that, okay, then what is the plan? He told that we will do prone ventilation. So they thought, okay, prone him. So next day I came to the ICU. Then when we looked at his blood gas, there was a huge discrepancy between the saturation which is there on the monitor and the blood gases. Blood gas PaO2 is perfectly all right. So there is dyshemoglobinemia, and this patient had methemoglobinemia, even the patient which I had. So methemoglobinemia. Now I introduce another gap, which is oximetry gap, which can be seen with abnormal hemoglobins. The patient what I had encountered is the patient who developed methemoglobinemia because of dialysis water, impurities in the dialysis water, which led to the conversion of ferrous ion to ferric ion, and there he developed methemoglobinemia. He was dialyzed once in some hospital near Varanasi. So saturation gap can be encountered in such disorders. So to conclude, how to approach acidosis. So if anybody had not listened anything, please listen to these 2 slides at least. So first, any acid-base disorder, you look at the oxygenation status. You get the PF ratio, you get the age predicted PaO2, then you estimate the alveolar, arterial oxygen gradient, whether it is elevated or whether it is normal. If it is elevated, it is shunt or VQ mismatch. If it is normal and the patient has hypoxemia, it is most common hypoventilation. Simultaneously, you rule out abnormal hemoglobins, which can lead to what is called as saturation gap. Now you confirm somehow that when the pH is less than 7.35, that is acidosis is present. So once acidosis is present, you will come to conclusion that it is not respiratory because the PCO2 is not so high, so it is metabolic. So once metabolic, then what will you do? You will immediately look at the compensation. As I told you, the change in PaCO2 is 4/3 the times the change in bicarbonate. After that, you calculate the anion gap, you correct it to the albumin. Now you calculate the what is called as a delta ratio, that is change in anion gap divided by change in bicarbonate. So once you calculate that, whether you are having high anion gap acidosis, most common reasons are lactic acidosis, DKA, renal failure. Normal anion gap acidosis, what will you do in normal anion gap acidosis? You have to look for diarrhea or RTA. How will you differentiate them? By looking at what is called as urinary anion gap. So urinary anion gap will be positive in patients with renal tubular acidosis, majority, and urinary anion gap is negative in patients with diarrhea. Few patients can have low anion gap like multiple myeloma or lithium intoxication, which is not so common. And few patients can develop what is called as osmolar gap. As you can see that when there is intoxication with various alcohols like ethanol or ethylene glycol or propylene glycol, you can have what is called as change in the calculated and measured osmolarity. There will be some difference, and difference is more than 10. You can look for osmolar gap. In respiratory, if it is the PCO2 is on the higher side, I will look at whether it is acute or chronic or acute or chronic by using the formula that the change in the pH is matching the change in PaCO2 or not, and I calculate the compensation. 1 for 10 and 4 for 10. So now how will you approach alkalosis? Again, oxygenation, it is the same. Once alkalosis is confirmed and it is metabolic, now I look at the compensation. Now it is just 3 by 4. Again, I calculate the anion gap, corrected anion gap and delta ratio. Review his history, volume status and blood pressure. If the urinary chloride is less than 20, it is GI loss. If the urinary chloride is more than 20, it is look for the urinary potassium, and further you work up and you rule out various complications or various disorders like mineralocorticoid excess or primary hyperaldosteronism or secondary hyperaldosteronism into the clinical picture. The most common is urinary chloride less than 20, that is chloride responsive metabolic alkalosis. In respiratory, again, you rule out whether it is acute or acute on chronic respiratory fructosis. The formulas are 2 for 5. So, simultaneously, I would like to add the last step in blood gas analysis. So, you might be seeing what is this base excess which is coming. See, base excess, whenever you can correlate these are the different types of approaches. What I told you till now is the bicarbonate based approach. Now, base excess approach, which is called the Copenhagen approach, and another approach which is called strong ion difference, based on strong ion difference, that is called Stewart's approach. All are there. So much confusion in ABG. Okay, this is what is called as transatlantic war. Actually, various countries have proposed various ABG approaches. Gold standard, which is previously followed, is the bicarbonate based approach. So that is what is discussed. But you can correlate. Your ABG will have all these parameters also. So you see that base excess is normal. I think that it is an acute respiratory disorder. In chronic respiratory disorder, base excess is usually 0.4 times the change in PCO2. When the base excess is equal to the base excess of change in PCO2, then it is metabolic acidosis. And the base excess is 0.6 times the PaCO2, it is metabolic alkalosis. So I want to say that when you calculate, you correlate with other approaches also. Don't look into only one direction that this metabolic acidosis is present. Okay, I will treat. There might be so many other coexisting disorders in the same blood gas analysis. So everybody is right, everybody is wrong in blood gas analysis. So you calculate what is called a strong ion difference. At least subtract sodium and chloride, major ions which are present. So less than 38, it shows acidosis. More than 38, it is alkalosis. I will not go into this depth. What is the effect of SID on base excess and this thing, that you can ask me later on if you have doubts. So ABG interpretation runs like this. Okay, somebody calls it respiratory acidosis, somebody calls the primary disorder as alkalosis. So it is like blind men and they are appreciating elephant. Everybody will describe it in a different fashion, like wall, snake, spear, tree, fan. Okay, one fellow will only see acute respiratory acidosis. He will work on only that disorder. But there might be so many coexisting disorders in the same blood gas analysis. Finally, you have to treat not the number, you have to treat the patient in front of you. The patient might be completely different of what you are interpreting the number. Thank you very much.